And welcome back, fourth and long fans. It's your footy correspondent, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another AFLW round review. Round 4 is in the books. And ladies and gentlemen, I have a very special guest coming all the way from Sydney, Australia, one of the panelists from the Coat Hanger podcast, one of my favorite podcasts, ladies and gentlemen. Check it out. Miss Emma Phillips. Emma, how are you doing today?
I'm really well, Donnie. Thanks so much for having me. Good to talk.
It is always great. I met Fee online. And have loved your podcast ever since. I had the pleasure of talking with Coach Kiwi. I talked with Tracy Kick. So I thought, why not talk with Emma Phillips? So here we go. Round 4 is in the books. Unfortunately, one of the topics that we kind of have to let's quickly go over, and that's COVID again, finding a way to steal a game away from us.
This was, I think, the first topic of conversation for our last Coat Hanger podcast. And I felt everyone sort of go, oh, COVID, we cannot stop talking about it. We have to talk about it. And everybody wants not to talk about it. But it presents a new challenge every week, several new challenges every week, doesn't it, for, sporting codes across the world. And of course, here in Australia, here in Sydney particularly, and in Melbourne, and also in Western Australia, where they've shut the borders to the rest of the country, we have a whole array of issues with teams not being able to play games they should be. So scheduling is, I want to say it's a day-by-day proposition, but at the moment it feels like an hour-by-hour proposition, doesn't it?
I'm not going to argue. I almost have to check AFLW.com every day in every probably half an hour to 45 minutes, because I swear I go, okay, we got a full round. And then 2 hours later, well, no, we lose one game, and 2 hours more. Oh, they're going to. So yeah, it was just been kind of crazy. So we've gotten that out of the way. COVID's out of the way. Let's focus on the footy, because a very unique and interesting round of footy, as we were discussing before we turned on the camera. A few of these results are a little shocking. So let's jump right into it. First game of the round. And I got to say, this was somewhat of a shocker and somewhat not, as the Freo Dockers take down the mighty Collingwood Magpies 38-7.
Right,
Man,
yeah.
pressure just wilted this Collingwood team.
I mean, who saw that coming, right?
I definitely did not, at least not the way it was. I thought this was going to be a competitive game, but I did not see this scoreline being the way it was.
I thought competitive game, and then that Collingwood would take the points, as I think most of us did. But what do we have? 38-7. So Collingwood scored 1 goal. Now, this is a team that at the beginning of the season, a lot of pundits had penciled in for winning the premiership. And look, they're still very, Collingwood is still favoured in that sort of top 4 group of teams that will really contest at the end of the year. But for Fremantle to win by 31 points, in Collingwood territory as well away from their home. They've been on the road for a while now. And as you said before we started, Donnie, Fremantle are not even playing their best football yet. That's the scary part.
Yeah, they still, the one thing that irks me and that keeps me from fully jumping on the Freo Dockers train is their lack of accuracy and goal kicking. Just too many behinds for me. But this was a performance that, honestly, I didn't recognize this Collingwood team. Normally, they're very good with the footy. They're very good at getting out of pressure. That defense is just so solid. But I don't know. It had to be the pressure and the perceived pressure, because people that were fumbling the ball were not ones I'm used to seeing. Brooke Benici, Kiochi, some of the backliners, Schleicher not always having a great, Livingston being under pressure all game long. And you got to give it Kiera Bowers, another great performance, to seeing Roxy Rue playing really, really well. Gemma Houghton with an absolute worldie of a goal there. So Freo, you got to say, they put themselves in that opportunity, in that topic of being a flag contender. My worry is, with their lack of goal kicking, get them a little bit, because too many behinds, 8 behinds. When you have that many inside 50s, you gotta get goals. So that's my only thing I got on them. But the fact that they're not playing at home, and they play better at home, is kind of scary for this Freo Dockers team. I'm crossing my fingers. Hopefully the Western borders come open and they can play at home. Same thing with the West Coast Eagles, but we'll talk about them and kind of their situation a little bit later. Just, oh man, but what an incredible game. And then to add to it, let's go to the next game. Another kind of a shocker, honestly. I I know the doggies have been gone for a couple of weeks, but I again did not see this coming as the GWS Giants beat the Western Bulldogs 43-22, a 21-point win by a GWS team that this was not the same GWS team I
Mm.
remember seeing against North Melbourne last week.
Yeah, I think that I described them on our Coat Hanger podcast as like Jekyll and Hyde. You know, they were really we're reluctant to use these kinds of words and to be so negative about the team we like to support here in Sydney, but they were awful against North Melbourne. They really were just terrible, probably the worst game we've seen them play. And we were all on the strength of just how poor they were, ready to write them off for pretty well the rest of the season. We were asking quiet questions about coaching and whether it was time to ask those very difficult questions, you know. But then they bobbed up and won by 21 points on a ground they've not played on before and looked like a completely different outfit, you know. And this was a side that was missing five or so of its key players, you know, or, you know, relatively key players. Like it was a different lineup. They had a whole different forward line, but they were something else. They looked rejuvenated. And, you know, I'm guessing they had a pretty heavy duty set of training sessions during the week and the old coach's spray. But gee, they came out firing, didn't they? And I do feel sorry for the Bulldogs. 20 days without playing and they look tired.
Yeah, middle of the first quarter, I remember in the back of my head going, this is not looking good. You could tell even some of the younger players that you would think had they would have fresh legs, they'd be fine. They were hitting a wall in the late
Right.
stages of the first half and then early in the second half. But the other thing I got to give a shout out, Nicola Bard going up forward and kicking 3 goals. Tip my hat to you, young lady, because for you to do that after kind of being called out by her coach the previous year. And I know, and I understand is that sometimes some players don't always respond that way, but she responds, she goes up, she kicks goals. I think that gives a lot of confidence. And for GWS now, it kind of puts them in this little area of Richmond, Carleton, and Richmond, where they've still got a chance if they get a
Yeah.
couple of wins their right way. They're still in a shot to make the finals. We'll have to see. Again, a few things are going to have to go their way. We'll have to see how does Collingwood bounce back. But the Duggies, I just feel horrid for them because 20 days off and they
Mm.
they look tired and just they're such a fun team to watch because Ellie Blackburn is just such an incredible player. I enjoy watching her play, but I feel so horrible because they had to go up to Sydney, just did not play as well as I think they could, but a little bit better performance. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. We jump to the other game of the round. The Freo Collingwood was one of the talked about, but the other one at Norwood Oval in Adelaide as the Adelaide Crows continue their great form, winning 35-21 over the Melbourne Demons. And I will raise my hand on this. I had the D's winning the flag at the start of the year. I was not expecting Adelaide to come out and play like this. As I've said in a few podcasts, Adelaide reminds me of The Last Dance from Michael Jordan. I honestly think this Adelaide Crows team, they know after this year, Port Adelaide, some of these girls are going to leave. They are trying to go out on top as a group, this incredible group that's put together in Adelaide. And they showed it here with an excellent performance against a very good D side.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Like you can really sense something with Adelaide, can't you? And I think you nailed it, Donnie, with that idea that they know Port Adelaide are coming and knocking on the door. Probably have already had good chats with a number of their players. And there is this lovely bond that they have that it's going to be sad for them when that happens. And it's going to be sad for us spectators, I think, too, because aren't they a joy to watch when they
Mhm.
are on fire? And they have been so consistent for so long. And I found myself, you know, doing a little bit of homework and a few notes before talking with you today, just kind of writing down all these stars from Adelaide. And it was just one after the other. Who do I talk about? Who do we not talk about? You know, and the list is long. I mean, they are so well serviced by Erin Phillips still at her age in the forward line, you know, and even just kicking a couple of goals is damaging. Her presence is damaging. She draws players to her. They've got Marinoff, you know, they've got Hatchard. Eloise Jones, I think, is a superstar in her own right, and any other club would probably be the number one midfielder. Rochelle Martin, and then they get Ash Woodland out of nowhere, who's
Mhm.
an incredible forward, young forward. You know, they just keep topping up with these brilliant skills, and so I've never really enjoyed supporting the Adelaide sides because I'm Victorian born, and of course it's against our football religion to barrack for anyone outside of Victoria, but especially the South Australian clubs. But I really do love watching this side.
I'm 100% with you. And then the scary part is Allen in the back. I mean, you look at each line on this team, and there is at least a superstar, if not two, if not three. And Aaron Phillips, I've stated it in every podcast. I agree with this. It's so hard to tip against Adelaide when Aaron Phillips is on the field because she's just such a game breaker, and she proved it here. I mean, Woodard has the great start kicking 4 goals in the first 2 games, only gets 2, but she doesn't get any. But here comes Aaron Phillips, and if her form gets any better, Adelaide is almost impossible to stop. I mean, the rest of the competition will be shaking in their boots if she gets going, because she is impossible, nearly impossible to stop. And this is not a bad defensive side on the D's, and an incredible midfield, an incredible forward line that they just didn't rock up to this game with their best form. And considering they only had 2 points halfway through the third quarter, I mean, it's almost
the score flatters them, doesn't it?
A little bit too, especially considering Adelaide kicks 11 behind. And I got on Frio a little bit about kicking behind. So that's going to get them in a finals competition. I've heard this quote before by somebody, I can't remember who says, the more behind you kicked, the more your behind will be kicked. And I love that quote, because it is very much true. The more opportunities you lose kicking behinds, I think really does mess with the psyche of a team. Now, they get a few goals that they needed to. Melbourne doesn't have their greatest scoring day. Some of their superstars not as impressive as normally. But again, I'm not going to write the D's off, but this definitely notches Adelaide up there. And with Frio playing well, you've got Frio and Adelaide right now. It's hard to argue aren't the 2 hottest teams in the competition. So we move from that great one to one that I think a few people looked at and went, this could be an interesting game. This could be an ugly game, depending on who you talk to. I think this was an incredibly great game as the Brisbane Lions at Maroochydore get a 2-point win over this Geelong team that, again, I've said it in a few podcasts. I love this Geelong team. They know what they want to do. They know how they're going to do it. You're not going to beat them. They're not going to beat themselves. You have to beat them. I love it. Georgie Pasparkas playing well. It was interesting. She took the sleeves off halfway through the third quarter. That was an interesting little change that I happened to notice, and I caught a few other pundits that happened to notice that. But this Cats team, they play good defense, and Brisbane didn't have their greatest goal scoring, and it almost cost them.
Yeah, it's another one, isn't it, that was a bit kind of Jekyll and Hyde with Brisbane from the week before. We're just looking like, oh, well, they're the new premiership favourites as well. We've forgotten about Brisbane, and they are a very slick outfit. And, certainly I think better on paper in many respects than Geelong, but to only come away with a 2-point win, they would be disappointed after that game. And I think you're right, Donnie, about Geelong and the kind of pressure play. They are itching for a win. They can smell it. They're really not far away from it. I've been a little down on Geelong. If anyone listens to the Code Hanger, they'll know that I've been down on Geelong for a good couple of years now, because I lament the fact that they can't score enough goals. So I feel like their in-your-face pressure around the field is outstanding, but they can't convert that into a score that's good enough to win matches. So, compare that with someone like a Fremantle, where they are very, have a similar kind of pressure mentality all around the field, really heavy tackle pressure, but they have the skills to back that up with a score, to put it on the board. But Geelong haven't got to that point yet. So, but to come away with only losing to Brisbane, it sounds crazy to say that would be a win to have a loss, but in a sense, I think it is for them to have a 2-point loss against last year's premiers. They will be really, you can see their confidence rising. I look forward to what Geelong have to bring next week. And the other, I think we need to mention the Prasparkas sisters are so great to watch, and the new Prasparkas for Geelong, but also Nina Morrison, back from injury. And I just think she's this real figurehead for Geelong and drives a lot of their ball. So as she grows in confidence too, the team seems to lift around her. Yep, I'm now excited by what they might bring. I'll stop bagging them.
Well, and the good thing is the Cats brought in somebody over the offseason that I think maybe can help them with that issue, and that's Chloe Shear, getting 3 goals in this game, which, was 3 of their 4 goals. They only kicked 4 goals, but they kicked 4-1. They were accurate, which is good, where Brisbane was 3-9. If Brisbane doesn't get as many shots on goal as they do, this is a completely different game. So, but Chloe Shear, I think is a great addition. That gives you a goal, that gives you a goal kicker that's consistent, that will put points on the board if you can get there. The issue I see is they're so defensive heavy. Some of their best players on the defensive side is that transition from defense to midfield to forward. Sometimes is that's where it breaks down. Is they're young, they're inexperienced in the midfield, they're talented, but it's inexperienced. It needs some time to mature. I've stated it a few times in a few of these podcasts. I said Geelong's a team, they may lose games, but their coaches should be really pumping these ladies up, because these performances, playing Brisbane, playing North Melbourne close, are stepping stones. They're not wins, but they are things to take a ton of positives out of, because you are taking two teams already, 2 of your 4 games against 2 teams should be in the finals. Whether they are or not, well, again, we'll see. 2 teams that should be in the finals, and you take them to the wire. That's impressive for a young team that I think will only get better. They get a few more drafts, they get a little bit more experience into this roster, and this Geelong team will be good. I'm fascinated to see how, if they play St. Kilda, how the rest of their schedule goes. I think they get a win this year because they're just so darn scrappy. They're going to pull one out. It's who is the lucky/unlucky recipient of that game. We'll have to see how that goes. So we jump from that one to, I'll be honest with this one. This was a tiny bit disappointing in this result. I was expecting a North win. I really was. North beat Carlton by 30, 51-21. But I'm not trying to be negative to Carlton. I don't know what Carlton's game style is. I just don't know. Like, Carlton's week-to-week performances are just inconsistent. I really, after Darcy Vesio, who's going to kick your goals?
Yeah. And we were asking similar questions during the week of Carlton as well, just kind of saying, well, they seem to have a number of stars, across every line. They really do have some out and out stars and can't put it together. So what is going on there? Is there a structural issue? Is there a coaching issue? They really should be performing better than they are. I'm really liking Nicola Stevens up forward. I think she made that move last year and started to show some real form. And she's the kind of player that flies under the radar a little bit. She's not a superstar glam goal kicker like a Vesio, but provides a lot of assists. So that works with Vesio up forward, I think. But in saying that, we did start to wonder whether Vesio will be better brought up the field a little more, and I mean, they have great skills and maybe are better used to deliver the ball into the forward line. I hate seeing players like Vesio not around it much. They are silky skilled. But as for the rest of Carlton, what do we say? I mean, amazing defensive line, Harrington's on fire.
They're just, I think they're missing, and I know she wasn't a massive ball winner, but Grace Egan was a very solid midfielder that I think was really good with the footy in hand. She complemented Maddie Prasparkas really well, and her injury, I think, is becoming a little bit of a focus point for me personally. I think that's where their midfield is hurting a little bit, because Grace Egan was solid ball winner. She's a great tackler. She did everything that you needed. She wasn't the Maddie Prasparkas, tons of ball went, but when she had it, she knew what she was doing. And her loss, I think, is really affecting this midfield, because they're having to rotate people in that are not maybe as solid as she was. So I'll have to see this Carlton team again. I can't put my finger on where they're going to end up. They've got the skill. If you look at their list and you look at the names, they've got the name power, but it's not resulting in results on the field. And I think that's the most frustrating part, especially for the Blue Baggers fans, because I thought this was a Carlton team that was going to be with Richmond and Gold Coast, being those teams 7, 8, 9 right there, fighting for that 6th and final spot in the finals. So man, so we'll jump off that. A good performance by North Melbourne, playing well, a couple of absolute worldy goals off the boundary in that one. But we'll jump to, I have to say it, the best game of the round. Another shocker, but not really personally. The Suns get another win, 2 wins in a row for the Suns. I didn't think I would say that. Honestly, I did not think I would say that. The Gold Coast
I
Suns
don't think they thought that they would say that.
As they get the big 5-point win over a Richmond Tigers team that I've been very, very much bullish on this entire season. But Harriet Cordner's loss, I think, is looming very, very large for the yellow and black, because their defense is just not as solid without that stable ability of her in the back.
Yeah, it's huge loss, isn't it? These injuries are really cutting, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. Just, but
But
but I
how much fun is it watching the Gold Coast play at the moment?
Urko,
Yeah,
I'll give her credit. She has been an incredible pickup for the Gold Coast. And then Tara Bohanna, she is showing a lot of teams that they missed one with her. And I'm really loving how her and Perkins have been playing really well together. They are building a great duo up front. Keep an eye on the Suns, ladies and gentlemen. Keep an eye on them because they're making some moves. And you've got now the best part is you take a little pressure off Kalinda Howarth. She doesn't have to kick all the goals. And that opens up. You've got some really good players. And Charlie Rowbottom has come in.
right.
She's fit in. She doesn't have to be a superstar. And she's
Hmm.
playing really well in a situation. She's got a lot of young talent around her that's going to grow up with her.
Yeah.
Keep an eye on the Suns, ladies and gentlemen. They're going to be a fun team to watch. But these are two of my favorite teams to watch this year: Gold Coast Suns, Richmond Tigers. It was sad to see them play each other because I enjoy watching both of them. So it'll be fun this week because I can watch both of them and keep an eye on them. So the last game is not technically a round game that we had this morning. And for some weird reason on all of my apps, I cannot find the score. Oy, 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 oy. For some weird reason, the AFLW app is not showing me the score, but I know that this morning the Western Bulldogs took on the Frio Dockers
Dockers, six
in
points they went down by in the
yeah,
end, three
yeah,
seven to 2-7.
this was one of those. This was more of the doggies I expected. This
Mm,
was more of the doggies performance than I expected. Good defensively, good in the midfield. Their issue just kind of came the wind in this game really kind of, you could tell that the team that had the wind had the advantage. It was
yeah.
very obvious. It didn't always say on the goal on the in the goals, but you could definitely tell by the play that the team that had the wind was the team that had it in their forward 50 most of the time.
Yeah, yes. Straightforward equation, isn't it, really? But a lot more spirit shown by the Western Bulldogs, and of course they're a club that I think have a long tradition of that sort of fighting spirit, and if they go down badly one week, you can be pretty sure they're going to show up the next week. And against a side that, as we've discussed, is probably it's nearing peak form, certainly very dominant in the competition in the Dockers, it's great to see that the Bulldogs only went down by 6 points, and they're hopefully beginning to overcome some of those COVID effects too.
Yeah, well, Ellie Blackburn. When Ellie Blackburn's your captain, I usually don't expect two bad performances in a row because she's going to grab a few collars, get in a few faces, and make sure that
Yeah,
the ladies know it's an
that's right.
unacceptable performance against GWS, and they
And her
definitely
players love
played
her.
this. Oh yeah,
Yeah, they love
she
her. They will play for her.
Oh yeah, and I'll say this as a fan, with her as a announcer when she does the color commentary is absolutely fantastic. I love her knowledge. Her Daisy Pierce is another one I love listening to. Kate McCarthy,
Mhm.
and the Hosking. I can't remember if it's Jess or Sarah that does it. I love when those ladies are in the booth because they give you a little bit of knowledge and they give you a little bit of their mindset, and I absolutely think that is fantastic. I have to applaud the AF the Fox Footy broadcast on that they're getting these ladies in the booth because I think that's what they need more of.
Yeah,
You need
giving
women.
them opportunities.
Exactly. And Daisy Pierce, look at what she's done in the AFL men's. I'm going to say this. I agree with a lot with Twitter. I'd rather have her on than sometimes some of the men that are on there.
Right.
That is honesty. I love her. Absolutely love
Yeah,
Daisy on
huge
there.
amount of knowledge of the game.
Absolutely for sure. So let's that does it for this round, kind of per se, and a fun round again, as we kind of discussed before, is a very intriguing round because a few upsets happen, which I think is great. But I wanted to bring this topic up just really quickly, and I know this has been discussed in a few podcasts. I just wanted to discuss with you just really quickly. We started on the mic. I wanted to talk about the fact that I've heard a lot of discussion about the season and the timing and the
Mm.
fact that it's being played in summer where normally with the men's competition it's played in winter. And I just wanted to go off your, I kind of expressed, and I'll say it here just in a little bit, what your thoughts on it. I mean, I've heard a lot of people saying it should be move it to winter, and I have a few issues with that, but I wanted to see what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. I have some issues with the idea of moving it to winter as well. And it's a difficult concept, I think, for Australians who really have grown up, generation after generation with football being played, Aussie rules football being played in winter. It's just how it's supposed to be, right? That's the tradition. So
Mhm.
there is this really strong kind of heartfelt, emotional desire to have the women's game played in winter. And I completely relate with that. I do feel like it'd be a mistake to do that at this point and to clash with the men's season, even if games were played at different times. I know how the press, especially in the more traditional AFL states, Victoria, South Australia, Western Australia, how the press will handle, the women's games. They're going to get short shrift and be moved way back in the newspapers. And yeah, look, it would be overshadowed. I think there's no question about that. And I'm pretty strong in the belief that at the moment, at least for at least a number of years, we need some clear airtime, some clear space for the women to play. Now, whether that's through summer, like the peak of summer, which is obviously pretty hot here in Australia and in all states, it's hard work on the body. And I worry that if they're doing that, aside from the toll that takes physically, that we won't see an extension of game times or an extension of seasons because they say, oh, well, it's already rough enough on their body. So that's the thing that worries me. I know there was some talk, the Adelaide Crows girls were talking 2 or 3 weeks ago about this on, I think it was Anna Sanctum, and their thoughts were around October would be a good time to start the season. So pretty well immediately as the men's season finishes, it moves into the women's season. So it's still getting warm then, but it's not that peak heat. And I think that for me is probably the best option. Certainly hearing the players say that, and they're at the forefront. And if that's what they want, I'm prepared to back them on that. It also doesn't clash terribly with too many other sports. I mean, our cricket season runs through summer as well, and that doesn't really start until December, mid-December. So there's plenty of space. I think we can compete with some horse racing, but that's really about it.
Yep. And I'm 100% with you. And I got kind of fiery, and I won't get as fiery on this, but I understand the argument to wanting to play it in winter, but I've stated it, and it's nothing against it, is that it's a boys club when it comes to the media. They're going to pick the men's games over the women's games, even if you put the women's games as curtain raisers, which I don't like the idea, because not too many people are going to come for 5 hours, 6 hours of footy. It's right. Just not, it's not going to happen. As much as I understand people saying that would be a great idea, you're not going to see the fans at the women's games. They're going to show up for maybe the fourth quarter, which would be kind of nice if the game is close, but that's not giving the girls the credit that they're due. And some of these,
and it makes them kind of second fiddle, doesn't it?
Exactly. And that's my argument. It's like, I understand you wanting this, but you have to understand this is still a maturing competition. It is not nearly where it's going to be in the next 5 years. Each and every year has seen an exponential jump in skill and talent. You are getting more and more 18-year-olds, these young ladies, Ellie McKenzie, Georgie Prasparkas, Maddie Prasparkas, Sarah Hartwig, Eleanor Brown, some of these young ladies that are 18, 19 years old, that they have been playing footy since they were 5 and 6 years old. All due respect to the cross-coders and some of these girls that played in the younger days and had to stop because of Auskick ending at 12, these girls have not stopped. Their skills have gotten better. They've gotten better coaching, and they've gotten more competition. This is only going to grow, but we cannot rush it, because if we rush it, it is going to collapse. And I don't want that to happen, both for the ladies that are playing, but for women's sport overall in Australia, because I think, and I'll nod your head on this, I think there's much more passion for women's sports in Australia than here in the States. That is my honest to God opinion. Yes, really? we have more pro sports, but look at the World Cup. How many people did you get to the World Cup a couple of years ago? You nearly sold out the G. You're seeing tons and tons of people coming to the women's games. I've watched WNBA games over here that are pro women, and they're getting 3,000 people.
Right.
So in my honest opinion, it's growing. You gotta let it, give it some time. Don't try to rush it. I want these girls to be professional as quickly as possible. I think it's there. But again, you have to convince the money people to make it that, because once they do, trust me, once these girls get paid professional, they're full-time professional athletes, full-time training, you are going to see even better skill.
Yeah.
But until that money is there, you have to be patient. I understand everybody's argument. I understand you want it now, but my argument, and I've said this to a few people online, I said, for the detractors, the Twitter trolls and all these people, they're like, well, why would I want to watch a game? It's not nearly as good as the men's game. I said, because it's 6 years old. I said, were you alive in 1897 when the AFL was 6 years old? I'm pretty much going to guarantee you that these girls' skills is already better than many of those guys back in 1897, 1898, when the league was only 6 years old. Have a little bit of patience. It's
Yeah.
going to come. Be there, support these young ladies. These are incredible, incredible women. I've heard they're very genuine. They haven't been washed of their personalities like some of the men do. That's my honest opinion. Some of the men,
Yep.
they're like robots. Yeah, 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 yeah. They
The
answer
media training.
questions exactly. These
Yeah.
women, I loved last year at the awards when Ruby Slicer, they were talking to her about her crush that she had, and she was very honest. I loved that. Absolutely love that. Do not let these ladies get washed out when it comes to media training. Let them be themselves
There's a
and
nice
trust.
authenticity, isn't there?
Exactly. And it makes the competition that much
Mm.
better. So I will get off my high horse for a little bit. All I say is, and I tell most of the women that I talk to with this podcast, I am an ally. I am here any way I can. That's why I do this, because I really want this women's game to progress. I am thoroughly enjoying this. They make my Friday and Saturday nights in the cold of winter here in the States so much fun because I get to watch footy, and I thoroughly enjoy it. So now that I've had that, I think it's time to do some tipping.
Ha.
I know
Tipping.
we're still early in the year, and unfortunately, we already know the GWS unfortunately is into safe health and safety protocols, so their game against St. Kilda has been postponed. I feel bad for St. Kilda. This is the second game, unfortunately, consecutively that
Mm.
they potentially have lost due to health and safety protocols. So we will go with the 6 games as of right now. They're still scheduled. Again, we are recording this early in the week. Hopefully, no more games get canceled. So all these games go as they are supposed to. So we'll start with the first one down at GMHBA. I don't think I'm jumping off too high a limb here. I think the Cats get their first win of the season. This Eagles team has just not convinced me that they're all there. So I'm going to go the Geelong Cats in this first game against the Eagles down at GMHBA.
I agree with you, Donnie, thoroughly. And I think they'll win well, actually. The celebration times down at Geelong. I agree with you on the comment about West Coast as well. You always feel like they're sort of thereabouts and then they're just not, unfortunately. I can't see them getting a win in a hurry this season, unfortunately. And I think Geelong will really seize on that opportunity and the kind of wave they're riding, having lost very narrowly to last year's premiers last week. At Geelong for the win, I'm going to say by 4 goals.
Yeah, it'll be a fun one. It'll be very exciting. Hopefully we'll see Georgie Pasparkas have some fun and all that. Again, I hope the Eagles, but you've seen 2 different West Coast teams
Yeah.
handle this hub completely different. Frio has thrived and played well. West Coast, not so much. Again, they've also had a little bit of drama with the whole Pride round thing. We won't open that can of worms, so we'll move on. Alrighty. So again, unfortunately, the GWS St. Kilda game has been postponed. So we move to the next game, which would be an absolute cracker up at Maroochydore, as Brisbane, coming off that narrow win over the Geelong Cats, greet a Pies team that I want to see how they respond in this one. So who do you got in this one?
Yeah, this is a really tough one. I think at home I'm going to back Brisbane. The heat up there, the ground that they're beginning to know quite well at Maroochydore. They will be, as mentioned, disappointed with their narrow win last week. Sounds strange to say that, but I think they would be given their premiers. And I think that they will respond really well to that. Now, in saying that, of course, Collingwood are in a similar situation where they need to respond to what happened with them against Fremantle last week. It's going to be on this game. I think it will be really tight in the clinches. I don't think we'll see a whole lot of free-flowing scoring. It will be pressure city, and it'll be the team that withstands that pressure best that will come out with the points. For me, that's Brisbane. I think they just have across the park. I think they have just a little more in terms of composure and skill at this point than Collingwood.
Interesting. See, and for me, I look at it as I think I'm not going to put a ton into how Collingwood play because I think it is a little bit of how Frio plays. Frio plays that manic pressure type of game. Brisbane really doesn't do that as much as Frio does, and it's effectively, and I think a little bit of I think that embarrassment I think might spur it. So I'm going to tip the Pies in this one, but I think this could be
Mm.
a game of the round one because the Pies if they can get going, if they can handle the footy, they've got one of the best and so solid in midfield, even without Bree Davy. A forward line that's very, very difficult. But I'm interested to see the matchup is, who does Ruby Slicer go to? Does she go to the young superstar, or does she take Dakota Davidson? Where does Livingston? Who does she guard? So I want to see the matchups defensively with Collingwood via that Brisbane Lions forward line, because there's some dangerous players, but you've got some really good defenders for Collingwood. I'm gonna tip Collingwood, but this one I'm gonna bounce back and forth a little bit, because I want to know who's playing, who's not, how the pressure's gonna go. But I'm gonna tip Collingwood, but this one's gonna be fun. Oh, down to Casey Fields, the lovely fortress that is Casey Fields in the wind. They will greet the Gold Coast Suns. The D's play the Gold Coast Suns. I think this one's a little bit closer than some people think. I'm going to tip the D's. I don't want to be the Suns in this case, because I think the D's are going to be not happy after not a great performance at Adelaide. So I'm going to tip the D's, but the Suns may give a scare to this D's team.
Yeah, I think you're right, Donnie. And look, I would probably almost word for word say what you just said, that the Melbourne will win this, and they'll win it, probably relatively comfortably once they get going. But I could see a first half of very tight football, and look at the Suns really bringing something that Melbourne are perhaps not expecting. But they just, again, the D's still looking at those kind of top four positions certainly are going to be thereabouts, and they have got stars on every line, and they haven't, for me, the D's haven't yet clicked, and maybe they need a game like this against a side that isn't going to pressure them too heavily compared with some other potentially top four sides, to just find their stride, I suppose is the word. This may be the one. Yeah, a really tight first half for me, and then a breakaway second half from the Demons.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Melbourne, unfortunately, their first quarters have not been good. But
Yeah.
but Gold Coast has not been a team that has played very well in the first quarter either. So the first quarter could be an interesting little arm wrestle, because Gold Coast, the last couple of games, they've kind of been like a diesel engine. They took a little bit to warm up, and then by the fourth quarter, then they're going. Where Melbourne's kind of one of those, it's kind of the same thing. It takes them a little bit, but then in the second and third quarters, if they get going, then they can just run over people. I think the D's click earlier than the Suns do, and I think it gets a little out of hand. I think the Suns maybe draw back a little bit, but this is going to be a fun one to see some of the matchups. Like, I'm interested to see the Lauren Bella and Pierce in the ruck. That'll be a fun matchup there,
Yeah.
because that's a couple of really pretty good rucks in the competition going up against each other there. So we'll see who gets first to the footy. A very fascinating one, especially after the last couple of weeks, especially after the last two results, as the Doggies at home at Whitten Oval take on the Richmond Tigers. I coin tossed this one so many times, because do the Doggies continue their progression from week to week and become the team that I think they have been, or does Richmond kind of show that they kind of had a bad fourth quarter, let Gold Coast stay in the game, in Richmond's class and talent, even without Ellie McKenzie in the lineup? It's the Harriet Quarter missing that hurts me, because Bonnie Too Good's there. You've got a lot of skill.
Right.
I'm gonna tip the Doggies. I just don't like how their defense has been playing since her loss, and I hate saying that, because the Tigers are a great team. I'm gonna tip the Doggies, just because I think Bonnie Too Good has a really good game in this one.
Yeah. Look, I think again, you're right, Donnie, and I agree with you. The Doggies, for me, marginally in this one. Bonnie Too Good is a joy to watch, and Brooke Lachlan is finding some form up there as well. And of course, they have the devastating loss of Izzy Huntington, and some very big shoes to fill. But that point about progression feels kind of true for the Doggies at the moment. They will, as I said, really proud club, proud team. I think they will be really setting themselves for this one, for the win. I'm really looking forward to the clash between Mon Conti and Ali Blackburn in the centre. And it may be one of those where they both get a ton of possessions and drive their teams forward. But, look, if they match up on each other, that's just going to be something to, set your alarm clocks for.
Oh yeah, class on class, and Mon Conti, just
Yeah.
absolute silk, absolute silk. She's just so pretty when she has the ball. She's so smooth, and everything slows down, and I love watching her play. But the other thing I kind of forgot to kind of go into, and again, I'm still going to tip the Doggies, but this only worries me, is the Doggies only have 3 days recovery between
Good point.
today and Saturday. So the biggest thing, I think the Doggies have to jump early. They have to jump early, get a lead on Richmond, because, and pardon the pun here, I think Richmond comes roaring back in the second half, because I think they won't have the weariness or the weary, tired legs come the fourth quarter. I think the doggies win this, but this one's going to be closer, even more closer, because of the fact the doggies have less rest than the Richmond Tigers will have
Yeah.
had. So
I wonder if they would consider running a tag on Monconti for this one. Might be something that they need to do. But again, do they have the
yeah,
legs for that, for such a thing? I should
yeah,
tell you, Donnie, that Monique Conti played her junior football with my club in Victoria,
awesome.
and she was one of those players that was just absolutely head and shoulders above anybody else, really, in the competition, except Izzy Huntington, perhaps, who was there as well at the same time. But Mon was the sort of player who would get the ball, and the crowd of parents and onlookers would kind of stop because she was just that good.
Mhm.
So it's not going to be long, I think, before she wins rather a best and fairest medal. She's as you say, very silky, incredible player to watch. They will have to shut her down.
Yeah, I think it's one of it's a lot like the men's competition, unfortunately, is that you have to be in the finals, in the finals argument to really get into the votes. She plays really well, but unfortunately, when your team doesn't come out victorious, very rarely do you get the 3 votes. You have to be
True.
incredible to do that. So I think as Richmond progresses, again, Ellie McKenzie coming back hopefully soon. She's absolute gun, absolute superstar. Having those two together will be absolute fun for the next few years. Crossing my fingers they both stay there. I know with the expansion could be fun. So we'll jump over to Icon Park, staying in Victoria, and Icon Park as the Carlton Blues host the Adelaide Crows. And I'll say it, I can't tip against the Crows in this one, because I just don't think Carlton has the firepower to stay with this absolutely dynamic Adelaide Crows squad.
Yeah, I kind of have a knot in my stomach for Carlton thinking about it. I don't think this one is going to be pretty.
Unfortunately, I hope it's competitive. I really
Yeah,
do. The blowouts, they leave a bad taste in my mouth. But Carlton's got the abilities. They've got some talent. It's can they show up against, again, hard to argue, not one of the most informed teams in the competition. Then to the last one, we jump down to Hobart, down in Tassie, as the North Melbourne / Tasmanian Roos take on the Fremantle Dockers in what I think is going to be an absolute cracking last game of the round. I gotta give it to the matchmakers here. This is a absolute cracking game. I'm gonna tip Frio, but North will not surprise me if they find a way to win this, just because, again, as we said with the doggies, short rest, their pressure. Now they've been one of the fittest teams, so who knows? Maybe this might just fit Frio nice and well.
yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? And I'm a very big North Melbourne supporter, so it's hard to say this, but I do think Fremantle will probably pip North in this one. Again, I think just really finding their form. They have a it's just a huge skill set across the park. In saying that, North Melbourne now they've moved Emma Carney out of the midfield, of course, to be running off half back, where she seems to be really enjoying herself. Actually, she said she had to park her ego to do that, which I can well understand. But what that's created is space for Ash Riddell to just become this dominant. I think now Ash had 30 touches last week. Is now averaging 28 possessions per game, which is just phenomenal, really, in the women's competition. Alongside her, Mia King found form last week. So I think it may be a battle of, the Kiara Bowers tackle machine versus Ash Riddell's free running, give me the ball kind of situation. That may be the really telling factor. And also which ruck gives their mids the first use of the ball. It will be closer perhaps than people expect, or those who are tipping Fremantle anyway. But yeah, Fremantle for me in the end, unfortunately.
Yeah, this will be a fun one. Kara Bauer's tackling pressure is going to be interesting to see, but you got to tip North when it comes to the ruck. But it's Haley Miller, it's O'Sullivan, it's Kara Bowers. That midfield is there's some ability in that Frio midfield, so it's going to be a fun. This one's whichever team gets more supply to their forward line, I think is going to be
Right.
the one that wins this one. Especially both defenses, they're good, they're not superstar great, so it'll be as who can play the best inside their own defensive 50 and who can score. Will Frio's lack of goal scoring or inaccuracy sometimes in goal scoring, unfortunately, Gemma Houghton, I'm looking at you a little bit with your record number of kicking behinds. Unfortunately, this, again, not a diss. I say that playfully. That I think will be a big thing is, can Frio kick goals? If they can kick goals, I don't think a North has enough to stay with them, but we'll see. Again, always fun. Again, the competition, I think, is starting to get really, really exciting.
Mm.
We're getting into that middle of the season. You're starting to see list depths and everything like that start to come into play, which I think might throw a few curveballs, which personally I like. So I think that my friend is going to do it for our chat and tips. Again, unfortunately, that postponement, I have not heard anything else. Emma, this has been an absolutely fantastic chat. I'm so glad that we were able to catch up. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Donnie. It's been a pleasure.
It always has. So I will keep the invitation open. I've still got a few rounds still left to go in the final. So maybe we'll sit there and chit chat again. This has been so much fun. Please,
Absolutely.
again, the next time you chat with Fee, please let her know I'm thinking of her. I know that she's gone through a lot. I've been trying to keep reaching out to her, make sure she knows that I'm thinking of her and everything like that. And please keep up the great work with the Coat Hanger podcast. It's absolutely
Oh,
fantastic. Please if you talk to Pete too, let him know. Tell him hi for me.
I will.
He will remember me because we actually called a game at Nationals a couple of years ago. I was his color commentator and
Oh,
had a blast working with Pete. He's absolutely fantastic. I love
yeah,
his
he's a good guy, isn't he?
his energy is
Does a
awesome.
great job. Yeah.
Yeah, I was so sad I wasn't able to make it to Nationals this year. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it over, and I'm hoping he can get over for this next national tournament here in October later on this
It's
year. Hopefully, he
in
can make it.
California this year for you.
Yes.
Did I read
So
that right? Yeah.
yes, I will say this, and I've said this to a lot of the pundits that I talk to, is like, if you get a chance and you can make it over here, come to Nationals. It is the best tournament to come to because
Yeah.
everybody's there. It is up to five fields of footy, four men's divisions, two women's divisions, and it is footy for 2 consecutive days.
Yeah.
And it is a blast. I mean,
Yeah. That sounds great.
pies, beer, and footy.
Right.
You can't go wrong, and you get a bunch of Americans that love the sport. And we
Uh-huh.
talk the sport, we know the sport. So, and there's plenty of expats there too. So it is a blast. So I say to any Aussies that are listening to this, if you can keep an eye out, USAFL Nationals, Ontario, California. So it won't be too much. All you got to do is fly to LA. Ontario is there as a suburb. Come out, check it out. It is a blast. You will enjoy the
Okay.
footy. It may not be the most amazing footy you ever see, but it's fun to watch, and you're gonna meet a lot of Americans that love the game of Aussie rules
Yeah.
football.
I'm well due to come out to the States again. So, I saw that the other day and thought, gee, that'd be good to get to. So
So
maybe.
mark your calendar.
Yep.
I know on my Twitter feed I have at least a couple of Australians that have already said that if everything is okay, they're going to try to come over, and I'm thoroughly looking forward to it. So, ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode in my AFLW round reviews. Emma, thank you again so much, and we will see you again next week.